up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Cheeky Geek Weekly. I'm your host, Joshua Irish, and man, it has been a busy couple of weeks, let me tell you. There has been a show for a couple of weeks. The first one we didn't do because I was kind of getting ready last minute because I screwed up and didn't realize I was going to New York in like 2 days' time. So I thought I had another week, got my schedule kind of mixed up and messed that up. So actually ended up going to New York City to go to Toy Fair just like in 2 days' time. Had no idea. Drove kind of all through the night with Jim and Jason from USAsterjacks.com. Really good time up there. Originally I was going to use this episode to kind of recap that and kind of talk about what happened, but I'm not going to now in light of the PlayStation 4 event that went down today. So we'll save that for another time. But in the meantime, actually, if you head over to USAsterjacks.com, I think they're going to be posting up a recap that I kind of wrote up about it earlier tonight. So you can hear a little bit about Toy Fair there. But today, what I would like to talk about is the PlayStation 4 event, which we really didn't know was a PlayStation 4 event per se. I mean, everybody kind of knew, but they didn't know. Sony announced, I think it was earlier last month, that they were going to be doing a very special announcement on February 20th. So now that it is here, what kind of happened at that event, and because I'd like to talk a little bit about my thoughts on it. So we've been waiting for the PlayStation 4, this announcement, and it was kind of weird to hear Sony come in like really, really quite early in the year to announce anything related to the PlayStation, because you figure that kind of news is going to come out of E3 or in a dedicated event probably closer to the holidays for 2013. But instead, Sony just out of nowhere is like, we're going to have this event on the 20th, so stay tuned because there's going to be some cool announcements about PlayStation. So, we all kind of were like, curious like what's going to happen, and then, I don't know if you saw, but there was the leaked controller picture that came out. I think it was like a week or two ago that started kind of like floating around the internet. But I thought we could kind of start there because that's one of the first things that they showcased. And you know what? Kudos to Sony, not just because they went concave for those analog sticks instead of the shape that we're used to, but you can really tell that Sony's really trying to rethink their approach in this generation in terms of how they deal with developers, how they deal with consumers, and that's actually evidenced all the way down to the controller hardware. And what I mean by that is one of the coolest new features is that it's got a built-in share button, which basically what they had said was they wanted to make sharing video clips of like your progress in-game to be as commonplace as people sharing screenshots of what they do with their game now, which I don't share a ton of screenshots, so I mean maybe there's a thriving community of people that do that, but as someone who works with video quite frequently, I was very intrigued by that, especially considering that I've been, looking into like capturing game footage myself so I can bring you guys more videos on the Geeks Podcast YouTube channel and everything. So the fact that this is kind of like natively built into the controller, I feel like it's a really, really big deal and really a testament to how seriously Sony's taking like, social media and people's desire to, kind of share their experiences with each other. Because it's like this dedicated share button. It's not like a button that, could serve other functions or anything like that, even though I'm sure it could if, a developer wanted to in-game use it for something else. But, it's like Sony really wanted this to be like front and center, like in your hands at the drop of a hat. You can just share this content of what you've been playing in your experience with anybody else. That's really a cool thing. They could have easily just said like, okay, we're going to add something in the menu, or we're going to add something software related that lets you share. And they probably will. Excuse me. And that'll probably be like, somewhere in the interface, surely. But the fact that there's like a dedicated hardware button, like they actually sat down and said, okay, this needs its own button. This has to be something that, is just readily accessible and is just, always there, always at a moment's notice. That's just very, very cool. And to me, very forward-thinking of Sony, actually. Now, the other cool change to the controller was they did actually have like a touchpad in the middle, which I assume will kind of take on some of the context, like context-specific functions that I was thinking, saying that the share button could technically do. Although that really didn't seem to be showcased very much during this event. And the other thing is they added a light bar on the controller, which they said was made to make it easier to identify players, which I don't really get that. I don't really feel like I've had a lot of trouble identifying who's holding what controller generally. I mean, maybe there's some, use case for that I'm just not seeing. But, I mean, I guess it's cool. It looks cool. It changes colors and everything, so I guess that's kind of neat. So that's kind of like the main parts of the new controller. And that's the weird thing. Like, it started with that, and then they moved on, and they talked about they're having this new peripheral that works in tandem with it, which I assume tracks the light bar on the front, kind of like. It looked very Kinect-ish, but not quite. Actually, if you looked at the unit, it kind of looks like an elongated, like, kind of, like the jam box from Jawbone. It kind of reminded me of that, but it looks like it's basically two cameras that can kind of allow the system to, record and sense depth in the room. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of, like, motion controls, or at least the ability to use motion controls moving forward. And I assume that's why they did something like that. So they didn't really touch too much on it. So I'm not really sure like where they're gonna go with it. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Now, one of the things that kind of creeped me out was prediction technology. That's the thing. Like, they really touted like how powerful the system is, and they talked about how they're trying to make it friendlier to developers, and all of these tricky new sharing and social features. But some of the stuff is downright creepy, and one of them is prediction technology. Basically, and I don't think they specified like how much hard drive space there was going to be on the PlayStation 4, but prediction technology says, okay, Josh likes to play shooters and the occasional puzzle game, so I'm betting he's going to want to download this, Killzone 6 demo. This is Killzone 6 full retail game. So, instead of asking me, I would imagine this is something you can disable, because I can't imagine that it wouldn't be. The system will automatically start downloading what it thinks I want to play. And if it's correct when I buy it, I don't have to wait for it to download, because it kind of already figured out in advance, kind of like Minority Report style, like pre-crime or precog, what I'm going to buy, which is kind of a horrifying prospect in itself. Like, all I can think about is like Minority Report and like, pre-crime and all that stuff. But at the same time, it's undeniably forward-thinking. I mean, they probably do have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to buy next. And while, yeah, it's kind of creepy and some people are going to find that invasive, doesn't really bother me much. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I think it's kind of neat that, it'd be kind of this more convenient thing. And, because who likes to wait? And that was actually another thing that they pitched in terms of waiting, or, what you would find an inconvenient experience on your console. One of them is the time it takes to just power on and load up a game. And it's really weird, because I don't know about you, but I hadn't really thought of that as much of a problem until they kind of pointed it out. And then I thought about it, I was like, man, it does take a while for a 360 to fire up, or the PlayStation 3 menu to load for me to get to what I want to do. So one of the big things that they were pitching was, I think, let's see, how did they name it? It was something fancy pants. I can't find it now. But basically, it's kind of like an instant on, instant off thing. And it automatically saves data, for your game. And I'm not sure if this is going to be like, like a universal requirement for all titles, or if this is just something that they're recommending developers take advantage of. But it makes sense, because I don't, really want to sit around and wait for a game to fire up, especially in addition to regular load times, which admittedly are better now than in generations past, like the PlayStation 1 generation. But, the fact that, you can just kind of power it on immediately and kind of get to what you're doing is great. It's weird, though, like, they're talking about a lot of these features, like video sharing and, predictive technology, and, the other thing, client-server kind of setup. They're saying that basically all the PlayStation 4 games, or at least their aspirations, that you will be able to play your PS4 games on your PlayStation Vita. And it was so, I think it was The Verge, I was reading their live blog of it, and they were like, why wouldn't they make it play, why wouldn't they allow it to serve up game content to devices people actually own, which was kind of a cheap shot, but it's true, the Vita's not been doing so hot. I mean, I own one, I think it's a great system, but you can see Sony kind of trying to infuse some of that Sony magic, from the PS4 into the PS Vita by saying, like, you can kind of stream games locally from the PlayStation 4 to the PlayStation Vita, which is kind of neat. Let's see, what else did we have from a feature standpoint? They did partner with Ustream. I assume that's because... one of the things that I thought was kind of weird is now people can just kind of tap into your game experience and see what you're doing. They call it, like, looking over your shoulder gaming. So, if I'm playing Crysis 3, for example, a buddy of mine can basically just watch me, which seems kind of voyeuristic. It's kind of sexy. It's kind of a turn on. Sorry, that's weird. And can just kind of like watch me play. And then while he's watching, he can actually talk to me and have like his text kind of imprint in the game, which I think is kind of weird. At that point, I would just voice chat with somebody. But, at the same time, I guess that's kind of neat. Or I guess if you just wanted like subtle visual cues, if you had a bunch of people, or if you could even restrict it and say, hey, I don't want to talk, if you're just really into the atmosphere of your game and you will only accept text messages from somebody. Maybe that's kind of where they're going with that system. So, yeah, they have a huge focus this go around on social and making sure everything works. And one of the other features they touted was they're really keen on making sure it integrates with all the popular services, which they kind of were already doing that anyways. But, like Netflix and I'm sure like Spotify, Amazon Video, all those services seem like they're really trying to make sure that's baked into the system from Jump Street. And I assume that they've also included some scalability to address future services that come out as well. Because clearly, I mean, a lot's going to come out over the next whenever, and that's going to be something for them to look into. So what else? What else happened? Jonathan Bloom took the stage. You guys might remember him as the creator of Braid, or if you watched Indie Game the movie, which I just watched the other day again, by the way. It's a really good movie. He made Braid, and now is working on his next game called The Witness. And personally, like, I think it's really cool that Jonathan kind of came out and like showcased a little bit of his new game. But I think it was just really another example of Sony just saying like, hey, everybody, look, we're really embracing indie devs, and we're really making it easy to use our system. And that makes a lot of sense because, the PlayStation 3, while incredibly powerful, almost nobody would deny that. Historically, it had been kind of a complaint, at least early on, that people were having trouble, getting acclimated to the system. And then, some developers would refute that claim, say, no, it's not that hard to work with, and others would say it's a nightmare to work with. But there must have been some weight to that, because if not, I don't think Sony would have spent so much time today, a few hours ago, just emphasizing how friendly they're trying to make this system to developers, which really, that's just a win for everybody. It's a win for indie developers, and it's certainly a win for, like, AAA publishers who are trying to get their games out fast and make sure that, everybody can consume their content. As far as backward compatibility goes, it was kind of weird. They seemed kind of wishy-washy on that. Like, it seems like natively they're not going to have any PS3 backward compatibility, which if we remember when the PlayStation 3 came out, they were like, oh, it's going to be backward compatible, and it kind of was for like the first 6 months, and then it just kind of got quietly swept under the rug, unless you're like me and you kept your original PlayStation 3 and, kind of loved that backward compatibility. But what they say is their aspiration is that eventually all PlayStation content will work on the PlayStation 4. That's PlayStation 1, 2, 3, and 4. They envision a future where every PlayStation game runs on that. Is it realistic? I don't know. I mean, historically, Sony has not always delivered on the promises they made. If you remember, when the PS3 came out, they were like, it's going to have 2 HDMI ports, and every system's going to have Wi-Fi, and there's going to be 7 controllers supported, which, side note, I feel kind of like a hypocrite for pointing that out as like a bad thing. Like, I can look at Sony and be like, who would want to use 7 controllers? That's just goofy. But when Nintendo does, asymmetrical gaming and does like, 5 controllers, like the pad and the 4 Wii remotes, I'm okay with it. So I don't know if that means I'm like a Nintendo fanboy or what. I try to stay pretty impartial, but I just thought that was interesting. So will they deliver on all of this? We don't know, and that's the thing. Like, we didn't even get to see the hardware today, let alone pricing, release date. Like, we know it's coming holiday 2013, but that's pretty much it. So, they just kind of kept, like, talking about more and more games, and admittedly, they had some more cool game stuff to talk about. Drive Club is a team-based racing game that's going to be coming out, and the detail really was just astonishing. I mean, it's one of those things, like, every time a new console generation comes out, you almost wonder, like, really, didn't we kind of reach the plateau? Can it really get that much better? And the answer is yes. Every time this happens, it gets better. And today was no exception. Driving Club in particular, the detail is just, it really is just almost moronic in how detailed it is. Because, they were pointing out, they're like, we made rainbow reflections on the plastic casing of the headlights the same way it would if it was actually just recently waxed. And it's just like, that's a point of detail I wouldn't have even thought to include. So the fact that they're kind of going, into this level of detail to make a driving experience that amazing is, pretty impressive. What else was announced? Sucker Punch has a new game, a new exclusive coming out. I think that's going to be, let's see, what was that? I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. I think it's Infamous Second Son. I think that's what they said the name was. So, if you're a fan of the Infamous game, you'd have more to look through for there. They showed some Killzone footage, and it's funny because I think about when they originally showcased, I think it was like Killzone 2 or Killzone 3 footage for the PlayStation 3 back in like 2005, and everybody got like up in arms because they were like, that's not real in-game footage, that's just pre-rendered crap. But this seemed like the real deal, and it looked really, really, really good. Someone from The Verge pointed out like the physics still look very video gamey, which, what can you do? And it's still an early build, but as far as like, just texture work, light, reflections, shadows, all that stuff just looked amazing. Like, we're in for a real treat, and it's just, this next generation is kind of just getting started, and if this is what we're just seeing in the tech demos, if they actually live up to the promise, it's going to be really impressive. Beyond that, we also had, let's see, this was one of the weirdest things. Who was it? Hashimoto, who's like the brand director for Final Fantasy from Square Enix. He took the stage, and everyone was like, okay, he's going to take the stage. It's the, it's the Final Fantasy dude, get ready. And every time Sony has some event, and Final Fantasy is even just mentioned or whispered in the crowd, everyone freaks out. They're just like, it's going to be the Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's got to be the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So with this one, I'm kind of like sitting there, and even I'm kind of edging my seat, like, what's this guy gonna say? Are we gonna finally get it after years of feeling like tech demos and teases? Because it's like the biggest tease in gaming almost. And he gets up there, and he literally is on the stage for like 15 seconds, and he says, "Get ready for E3." And he's just like, "Thank you," and just like leaves. Like that's all he had to say was like, "Make sure you're pumped for E3." So I would assume that they're gonna make some massive Final Fantasy announcement there. Maybe they'll do the 7 remake. Maybe they will continue to tease us for a decade. Who knows? But at least there are rumblings of something new Final Fantasy for all you JRPG fans out there. What else? Oh, Move Creation. Okay. What was the name of the development outfit for that? I feel bad I don't have it right in front of me, but basically there's a new sculpting game that's coming out. It was Media Molecule, I'm sorry. Media Molecule was talking about this new sculpting game that basically revolves around the PlayStation Move controller, and they talked about how, the tyranny of the polygon, basically pointing out that, the design of 3D games and 3D worlds really hasn't changed that much. It's basically like you come up with a wireframe, then you apply textures, and, that's how you get 3D. And it's not very human or approachable for a lot of creative people that don't really understand how that technology works. So what they're hoping to do is redefine that technology by letting you use the PlayStation Move controller, like the wand, to basically sculpt in 3D space and very quickly create 3D digital worlds. Now, how they want you to interact with those worlds wasn't really clear to me in the presentation. I'm not sure if you'd actually create a game within the game, kind of the way you do in Little Big Planet, 2D style. Or if it's just like you just create these digital pieces of 3D art and then you can share them with people. I mean, either one would be cool, but I guess I just need to know more about it before I want to sign on. And this is another one of those technologies that I'm like, okay, that sounds good on paper, but is it really going to work out that way? So, we'll see. I think probably one of the biggest pieces of the entire presentation was Chris Metzen from Blizzard Entertainment just kind of takes the stage out of nowhere, and everyone was like, oh wow, okay, Blizzard's here, what is this going to be? And like he teased it so hard, like you got to give it up to him for showmanship. The guy's just like, he gets up there and he's like, okay, Blizzard has decided the one computer game that will make the translation or the jump to the PlayStation 3. And that game is, the style is just palpable, you could cut it with a knife. That's how high anticipation was. And everyone was at least I was thinking, are they going to bring World of Warcraft to consoles finally? Kind of after all those April Fool's jokes and stuff, is this really going to happen? It did not happen. They are bringing Diablo 3 to the PlayStation 4, which in itself is kind of cool. A lot of you remember out there, you didn't even cut your teeth on Diablo on the PC. You did it on the PlayStation 1. So to hear that it's kind of coming back to the console again, I thought was a really, really cool thing. I think it was unnecessarily dramatic, maybe, but still, it's cool to see that Sony's really, trying to hit hard this generation by partnering with Blizzard, of all people. Now, the only thing more surprising than that to me was, and it's like they saved this for the very end, and I almost wonder if they did it just as a huge dig at Microsoft. But that's the thing, I don't know enough about what's about to happen here. So let me just tell you, and then we can speculate together. Bungie takes the stage and announces that, their new game, which, you saw, I think I mentioned the video documentary that they put out on YouTube this past week. Their next game, Destiny, which is a 10-year effort by their own admission, they're basically creating a living, online, persistent world. It's kind of like a first-person shooter RPG from what I gather. At least that's what it would appear to be from the trailers. They are bringing it to the PlayStation, and they kind of cryptically say, we're a good fit for Sony. And the other thing is, they're after doing Halo, so it was really, I almost felt blasphemous to even mention Halo at this it's super Sony event. But, they did it, and I'm not sure if they're going to do exclusive. They said they were going to do some exclusive things for the PS4. I'm sorry, not the PlayStation 3. So, but I can't really sort out if that means just some exclusive content, or if this game is going to be purely PS3. I can't imagine it would be, because I just don't think the Bungie would want to carve out geez, I have no idea how many millions of 360s are out there online right now, or how many Xbox 720s there are going to be whenever Microsoft makes its big announcement. But yeah, so it was just kind of weird though, because historically Bungie, Microsoft, Xbox, Halo, those kind of all just fit together and they make sense. So to see Bungie take the stage of Sony, it was just really quite bizarre. But exciting nonetheless. Competition's always a good thing. Consumers tend to win out in that deal. So we'll see what Bungie comes up with and kind of how that whole thing shakes out. So that was pretty much the meat of the meat of the entire presentation. I mean, so they showed us a controller, they showed us a whole bunch of games, a whole bunch of tech demos showcasing the incredible power of the PlayStation 4. They showed us the new camera system, they showed us all these new online services and their dedication to developing all of these wonderful things and how the PlayStation 4 was going to be amazing, and yet they don't show us the PlayStation 4. Kind of weird. Which is just really quite bizarre, because, I mean, you know, there's been all this hype about this 20th event, and, you know, it seemed kind of rushed to begin with right here at the beginning of the year, where you wouldn't really expect it. And they don't even show the system. No, again, no mention of pricing, just that it's coming holiday 2013. And so I'm wondering, like, why not show the system? Now, and here's what scares me. Well, on the one hand, maybe a lot of these features are just pipe dreams, and they don't even have the architecture in place yet, and the system is not quite ready for launch, despite them trotting all these beautiful developers out in front of us to show us, you know, how wonderful it is and sing its praises. But I'm wondering if more realistically, like, they have it ready, they're just not quite ready to tip their hand yet, because they're kind of taking a wait and see what Microsoft does. You know, that kind of an approach in this generation. So maybe they're trying to have their maybe they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, where, you know, they beat Microsoft with a punch, they unveil this fancy new hardware, but then they also kind of, you know, hold back a little bit in case Microsoft drops some amazing bomb on them in the coming months leading up to E3. Guess we'll just have to wait and see. So those are my thoughts on the PlayStation 4. Please let me know your thoughts on the PlayStation 4 in the comments, you know, in a video response. Jump on Facebook. Hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. We love it when you do that. I love it very much, actually. We do have our Geek of the Week, and normally whenever I do a Geek of the Week, I tend to feature somebody who's just like, you know, kind of like myself, someone who's trying to, like, you know, create content, just put something, you know, really cool and interesting out there. And then I realized, like, I'm hanging out with these guys on a fairly regular basis. Why haven't I brought up the Nerd Code guys yet? So our Geek of the Week is actually a bunch of nerds. It's like Chet and Sleazy and all those cats. And you should totally go check out their website, because they're, you know, a great bunch of dudes. And certainly, more than just checking out nerdcode.com, make sure you check out their Facebook group. They got like 300 or 400 members in this open group. It's just a bunch of nerds having a good time talking about everything from, like, comic books, video games, movies, sci-fi, you know, just everything. Like, you know, it's very similar to Geeks Podcast in that respect. I think that's why we get along so well. Plus, you know, they're all just a bunch of handsome devils anyway, so that doesn't, you know, not too hard on the eyes. So, congratulations to all the Nerdco guys, especially you, Sleazy, for being the Geek of the Week. So that's all we've got for this week. Probably still going to do a Toy Fair wrap-up of some sort, whether that's going to be like a post or a podcast. I haven't really decided yet. It really depends on how tired I am and how much I feel like pouring through, like, tons and tons of, you know, video footage and stuff that I shot whenever I was in New York. So we'll see. So anyways, thank you so much for listening and watching. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day or evening or whenever it is that you're listening to this, because that's the nature of the medium. Stay tuned for next week. We'll have another podcast serving up for you. And Zeke and Storm will be shooting tomorrow, I think. So, you know, comic books are kind of your thing. Make sure you stop by and check that out, too. So thanks so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll catch you later. Bye.